This is Elena from Birth High, and today I'm talking with 24-year-old Emily Gerke about her two birth stories. The first, a medicated hospital birth, and the second, an empowering unmedicated birth, despite some decels in baby's heart rate during delivery.
My name is Emily Gerke. I live in Smithton, Missouri with my husband, Tyler, and we have a little girl who is just turned 3 in December, and then a little boy who will be 1 in April, and his name is Lincoln, and her name is Charlie.
Wonderful. And so today we're going to talk about both births. So to start us off, how about you take me back to getting pregnant with your first and what that looked like?
Sure. My husband and I were married for just right at a year when we decided to try for Charlie. And it actually happened pretty quick. I went off birth control. I'd been on birth control for, oh gosh, years, probably since high school. And so I was a little worried that it was going to take us a while, but I ended up getting pregnant right away the first try. And yeah, from there, I mean, pregnancy was pretty simple early on. The morning sickness for the first 12 weeks, but nothing really terrible.
And how old were you when you got pregnant with your first?
I was 21.
Okay. Awesome. So then, what kind of knowledge did you have about pregnancy and prenatal care before getting pregnant, and how did that shape your experience?
Honestly, not a whole lot. I babysat a lot of kids. I knew, we grew up in a church where there was tons of little babies all the time, and I love talking to the moms. But as far as knowing much, I really didn't. So I did know going in that I wanted to try for a natural birth because I was like petrified of needles. And that was kind of my only reasoning behind it. I didn't do much research beforehand. I should have, but I didn't. But I didn't do much research beforehand. So yeah, I mean, I just chose a regular OB. I wasn't real familiar, with the midwife thing before I had my little girl. So we just kind of did the routine hospital OB care, and it was okay. Um, it wasn't as bad as some people that I've heard with their experiences, but it was okay.
Awesome. So kind of getting into like the second and third trimester, how did you feel physically? Did you have any like symptoms or anything like that that you want to share?
No, not really. I felt great. I did fail the glucose test, the first one, the 1 hour, by 1 point. So I had to go back and do the 3 hour, and I honestly thought I was gonna die. That was probably the worst day of my pregnancy. um, yeah, that was so horrible, and I don't wish that on anyone.
Yeah, that drink is brutal. You'd
Oh
think
gosh,
they
it's
would make it
terrible.
taste better, but
Yeah,
uh,
no, no. But other than that, I mean, it wasn't, I had Braxton Hicks probably starting, I want to say around like 24, 25 weeks. But nothing really terrible. I didn't have any prodromal labor. Just it was pretty smooth.
awesome. So did you guys do a gender reveal or anything like that?
We did, yeah. We didn't find out until our 20-week anatomy scan, because we were worried that the blood test was going to be wrong. So we waited until then. So we did do a gender reveal at 20 weeks. But I'm trying to think of anything else. I think, yeah, I mean, it was pretty a simple pregnancy.
Great. So what did kind of the final weeks look like for you, and then how did delivery day start?
Yeah. Uh, Probably about 2 weeks before we had her, I started having Braxton Hicks, like, a lot, and there was a few days where I stayed home from work because I thought I was in labor, the first time mom jitters. Nesting, I think I washed her clothes probably, like, 5 times, rewashed them 5 times, and put them away in different drawers and, all the nesting things. Um, but let's see, I'm trying to think. Yeah, other than, like, the Braxton Hicks that I would have, and it wasn't anything real painful. It was just, I didn't know any better. So I thought I was in labor. It was awesome. But she was due on December 17th. And, being first time mom, not doing my research, I didn't want to have a Christmas baby. So we did opt for an induction at 40 weeks. And then, yeah, I mean, that kind of led up to our labor and delivery story.
Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else from your pregnancy, let's get into it.
Okay. So like I said, we went in for an well, 2 nights before her induction, we celebrated. My husband's a farmer. So they kind of finished up harvest. It was a long harvest that year. And so we all went to dinner and he got food poisoning. So, and then there was a snowstorm, and I think it snowed like 10 inches, which is like insane here. That only happens every like 6 or 7 years. So we actually headed to Columbia, which is about an hour away from our house. And we spent the night in a hotel the night before our induction. So he was kind of healing up from his. that was not good. But yeah, we stayed the night in a hotel. And looking back, I didn't realize I was in labor, and I for sure was in labor. But I couldn't sleep. I was restless. I thought, I'm just nervous about her coming and, getting excited. But I was for sure in labor. And then that morning we went to the mall, walked around. I said, Tyler, I really want to get my toes done before we have this baby. He said, okay. So I went to the mall, got my toes done, and this sweet man, I'll never forget it, was sitting beside me and, was talking to me pretty much the whole time. And he paid for my pedicure, and I was like sobbing through the mall. And my husband was like, what is wrong? So, I explained to him. And then from there, we grabbed dinner and then we headed to the hospital. It was probably like 5:30 or 6 p.m. when we got there. And we filled out the paperwork and they hooked me up to the monitors. And they were like, oh, did you know you were having contractions? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm having Braxton Hicks. And they said, no, you're not. Those are contractions. Oh, okay. So they checked me and I was like 3 centimeters dilated and 80% effaced. So I was like, oh, okay, sweet. I'd only been to a 1 before that. So I was kind of surprised. They kind of just let me labor for a little bit. They talked about, starting they talked about Cervidil to start out with because we were supposed to be induced. But since I was so far along and I was having consistent contractions, they decided that they were just going to wait a little bit and see what happened. The doctor on call came in because my doctor was not on call. And honestly, she was horrible. She was so attentive. I told her that, I wanted to try for a natural birth. And that was really my goal. I did not want an epidural. I didn't want any IV pain medication, that I just wanted to do it natural. And the first words that came out of her mouth was, okay, we'll see in a few hours. You'll be calling me. And I looked at my husband and I said, she better not come back in this room. And he goes, okay. So, right when we went in, they were kind of doing, they did my IV and they were doing like a shift change. And the night nurse we had, she was all right. But if we would have had our day nurse, I know we could have done it, no problem. But that was not the case. So they kind of let me labor. I think it was about like 9 p.m. So only like 3 hours into it. I was kind of starting to feel the contractions. I was like, okay, these are real. And then they let us walk around. They had me hooked up to the monitors pretty much the whole time. But they would let you for like 10 minutes every hour, I think, get up and walk around the hospital. And so we did that. I labored on a birth ball for a little while. And then probably around like midnight, they came in and checked me and I was already at 6 centimeters. I was 90% effaced. And I was like, oh, sweet. This is really, I thought it was moving along really fast. According to the doctor, it was not. So that's when they started Pitocin. Which looking back, like I know now that I could have refused that and I would have, since I was progressing so well, I would have been fine, but I didn't because I was first time mom and I didn't know. So they started Pitocin and labored until like about 5 or 6 a.m. And then she wanted to break my water. And I said, nope, you're not breaking my water, not until my doctor gets here, because my doctor, she had called us and said, don't let him do anything until I get there. Okay. So I told him no. And she pretty much told me it wasn't an option. So she broke my water and they turned up my Pitocin. all at once. And as soon as they did that, obviously everything got super real, super quick. And I didn't have everything was in my belly. I didn't have any back labor, which is good. But I did not know. We kind of planned on, because you always hear about the back labor. We planned, comfort measures for that, but we didn't know what to do. My husband had no idea. He was like, "Oh my gosh, she's in so much pain. I have no idea." So, probably about, I think it was, I gotta look at my notes here. Like 6 o'clock when they broke my water and did that. And then probably at like 6:30, which shift changes like at 7. 6:30 rolls around and I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And luckily, when I decided that, the anesthesiologist was literally getting ready to walk off the floor, so he came back and gave me an epidural extremely quick. I just kept telling him he was my best friend and that I loved him. I'll never forget that either. But as soon as they gave me the epidural, it probably kicked in within 5 minutes. I mean, it was very fast. He did a great job. And as soon as they checked me, I was at 8 centimeters. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I could have done this." So, after they did that, they checked me. I was at 8 centimeters and I was 100% effaced. And I was like, well, I've already got this epidural. I'm going to get some rest. And my husband said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go down and get breakfast." All right, good deal. So it was probably, at that point, it was like 7:30, and my doctor, she was not happy with the doctor on call for what happened, which I wasn't either, but it had already happened. So it was a done deal. I think I probably would have gotten the epidural sooner. But I just had in my heart that I was gonna be like really disappointed in myself, which I was, in the end. But that's what I needed at the time. And now I know that, that's what I needed, and it's fine. But let's see, probably say it was around like 9 a.m. to 9:30. I was 10 centimeters and I was ready to push. And my husband was still down getting breakfast. So I called him and I said, "Hey, I just woke up and I'm ready to push." And he goes, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." So he comes running up the stairs, and which it wasn't that, big of a rush, but the epidural was so strong that I could not feel anything. I could not feel pressure. I could not feel my legs. I couldn't feel anything at all. So I do kind of regret that part too, which I asked him for at the time. I was like, "I don't want to feel anything," but I regret saying that too, because I wish I could have at least felt enough to push well. Because I'd never done it before, so I had no idea what I was doing. But the day nurse that came back, she was kind of the head nurse, and she was awesome. She did, help me do different positions, pushing. I had to do everything on my back because I couldn't feel my legs at all. But she helped me use a towel and do different things, to kind of help baby come down. And then I pushed for about an hour and a half. And then, yeah, everything was pretty uneventful. My doctor came in. Charlie, she was crowning, and I did have a mirror so I could kind of see what was going on. One thing that I did not know that my husband told me afterwards, I did have a second degree tear, but I wouldn't have, but I guess she was taking a little longer than they wanted her to. And so my doctor reached up inside me with both hands and pulled her out. For what reason, I don't know, because she was fine. So that kind of stuck with me a little bit too. That made me upset. But I didn't know that until my husband told me. So in the moment, I was like, "Oh, she's here. This is great," But I did have a second degree tear, and I did have to get stitched up. But at 11:05, she was born, and she was 8 pounds 2 ounces. And they told me she was going to be like 5 or 6 pounds. So she was a big baby compared to what we thought she was going to be.
Oh my gosh, that's such an amazing story. Wow. So did they give her to you right away, or like what was that kind of immediate moment like?
Yeah, so as soon as she came out, they put her on my chest, which is what I asked for. We kind of did the leg cord clamping. It was probably only like 5 or 10 minutes. So it wasn't, the full time like it should have been, but I didn't ask for that because I didn't know either. So yeah, she went on my chest immediately, and I'm trying to think, it was probably like 10 minutes until she wanted to nurse. And then the nurses helped me get her to latch because they're like, okay, it's time to feed. And we did do skin to skin for like an hour and a half. And then my husband did skin to skin with her for half an hour. And then they did the weighing and all that. But the first time we latched her, I looked at the nurse and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. And so she helped me. And immediately when she latched the first time, her bottom lip went under instead of flanging out, it went under. And she was really fantastic. She caught that right away and pulled the lactation consultant in on the very first latch, and we got that figured out. And from there, she was fine. She nursed great.
Wow. Oh, that's so lucky. I mean, have
Yeah,
a good
yeah,
little nurser like that.
yeah, she was a champ.
Wow. So what did the rest of your hospital stay look like?
Um, I it wasn't bad. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. I could not feel my left leg for over 24 hours. That was scary. Because I was like, I thought something was wrong. And then I did have like a not necessarily a complication, but like my heart was racing really bad, and no one like acknowledged me or believed me that it was happening, and I was scared because I didn't know what was going on. Everything was fine, but that was just one thing that kind of made me nervous. We stayed for 2 nights, and that was kind of before COVID time. So we had all the people come and yeah, all the people come and hold and all
Oh.
that good stuff. But one thing that I didn't know as soon as I had her, but I do now. That's when my postpartum anxiety and rage started. And, I didn't know how to identify that. But like when people would hold her and she cried and they didn't give her back immediately, I told my husband, which he didn't know either, but I told him, I was like, I want to punch them in the face. And he goes, that's normal. That's just your baby. But it wasn't normal. And I didn't know. And that makes me really sad to think about that because, that happens to a lot of moms, and it just, nobody tells you that that's not normal, and you shouldn't have to feel like that.
Yeah, that's such an important thing to spread the
Yeah.
word on. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did kind of going home in your first, couple weeks as a family of three look like?
Yeah, it was pretty uneventful. It was the middle of winter, so we just kinda chilled inside and did skin to skin all day, every day. I let her nurse on demand. She probably nursed more than she should have, but she was gaining weight exceptionally well. Um, and yeah, probably I don't even know when to tell you that, the postpartum anxiety and rage, like, really, really set in. But somewhere in those I don't even think it was the first couple weeks, but, a little bit farther out, the rage set in, but the anxiety, she would go to sleep and I wouldn't sleep because and nobody really knows this. My husband knows a little bit, but not really. Because I'm kind of not that I'm embarrassed, but, I didn't get help because I didn't know, but I wouldn't sleep because I would just leave my hand on her all night to make sure she was breathing. And we had an owlet sock, that for kind of our peace of mind too, but I just couldn't I was just always afraid that she was gonna die. And I mean, I didn't enjoy those first several weeks or months as much as I could have or should have because I was just always afraid that something was gonna happen to her, that she was just gonna stop breathing and she was gonna die and I was gonna lose my baby. Um, yeah, they tell you about the postpartum depression, but they don't tell you about that stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I am sure that if you talk to like many mamas, so many people go through that, and are right there watching their baby's chest rise and fall to make sure, that's such a common thing, but people don't talk about it. So thank you for
Yep,
sharing that.
yep.
Um, so you mentioned the postpartum rage. Like, what did that look like for you? And how did you kind of deal with that?
For me, it looked like even when my husband would hold her and she would cry, or, when he was changing her diaper or her clothes, he couldn't do it right. I had to do it because I would just get so mad at him because, he wasn't doing it the way that it should be done or the way that I would do it. I didn't leave my baby even to go on a date night for dinner until she was 9 months old because I just couldn't. The thought of her crying and me not being there for her just made me so mad.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I did not leave. I left her at daycare, when I went back to work, but, I didn't leave her until she was 9 months old because I couldn't. I just would get so angry and angry at myself for, like, wanting to go to dinner with my husband, and I'm like, "No, that's you're a terrible mom. You can't do that because your baby needs you."
Mm.
Um, and this time around, I figured out that it's okay to do those things because you have to still date your husband. You can't just that creates a lot of problems. But you can't, your baby's gonna be okay. I know it doesn't seem like it, and it didn't seem like it at the time for me either, but, um, and your husband, he's doing the best he can. It's hard for him too. He doesn't know either. The baby doesn't know him, he doesn't know the baby, and they're still getting to know each other, and just I mean, you feel connected to your baby because you carried them for 9 months, but for me, it was, giving him grace because I just I would get so angry at him. It's honestly really sad to think about because I would get so angry at him for doing absolutely nothing wrong. He was doing nothing wrong. I don't know. It was just part of my postpartum with her.
Yeah. So how did you kind of get through that? And like, when did the clouds part for you and things change?
It probably wasn't until she was over a year old. And I honestly, I didn't get help, because in the moment, we didn't realize that's what it was. Because, you go to the doctor and they give you the little postpartum depression screening. And, I didn't have any of those symptoms. I didn't want to hurt myself or my baby. So, I was fine. Um, and it wasn't until probably a couple months after, no, yeah. Yeah, it was probably a couple months after, she was born. I saw something, on Instagram about epidurals blocking your hormones, and kind of not causing the postpartum depression, but in certain people, it can aid in it. And so I did a lot of research after that. And then, yeah, it wasn't until she was about a year old when I was like, really came to terms with that's what it was. I think I kind of knew the whole time, but I didn't want to admit it because I didn't want something to be wrong with me. Um, and then, past that, I was more gracious with my husband, and that helped a lot just to kind of just be patient. I know it's hard, but um, and to that point, she was so old, and I was 12, 13, 14 months postpartum that I was able to control my hormones a little better. Um, but kind of control things and just different coping mechanisms. If I needed to, I would just go and sit in our room and just sit in the quiet for a little bit. And, my husband knew that I needed that and that it was okay, that I didn't want to get mad at him or my daughter, which I didn't hardly ever get mad at my daughter. But, if I would get frustrated, I just needed a minute to just go and sit and just breathe for a little bit. And then I was okay. So I think that was, honestly, the biggest coping mechanism was figuring out that, that's what it was, and finding that thing that helped me was just taking a minute to breathe and relax and then coming back to the situation.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, is there anything else about your postpartum period with your daughter that you want to touch on before we get into your son's birth?
Um, I don't think so. Let me go through my notes right quick and make sure. Yeah, I would say, I mean, the biggest part of my postpartum was that rage and anxiety. And I would definitely say to new moms or, moms of 2 or 3, even if, it's not your first time, postpartum depression, rage, anxiety can hit you at any time. And it is scary. And, I know you don't want to admit it because for me, it felt like there was something wrong with me. Um, and so I just didn't want to admit it, but just go get help. It is so much better. And, after you do that, you just feel so much better and your life will be so much better. You'll be a much happier mom for your baby, and you'll be a better wife or partner. And yeah, I would definitely say that is a huge lesson that I've learned. And it's so funny. I kind of posted my story a little bit on Facebook, and it's so crazy the moms that have messaged me saying, that's what I felt too. And, they just it's not talked about enough. It really isn't. And I don't know, I have a huge passion for it because it happened to me. And right in front of my eyes and my husband's eyes, I was changing as a person, and neither one of us, knew why. But yeah, that was postpartum with her.
Wow, yeah, that's such a great message. Thank you. All right, well, if there's nothing else with Charlie's birth, we can move on to Lincoln's.
Okay.
So, how did kind of getting pregnant with him look, and how old was Charlie at that age and all that?
Yep. So Charlie was she would have been a little over 18 months when we got pregnant with Lincoln. And kind of the same, no, I was not on birth control with him because I nursed her until she was like 14 months old. And then I didn't get my period until then, thank goodness. Um, but after that, I tried going on the pill and it just made me feel terrible. So I just kind of tracked my cycles. And I was having kind of some abnormal cycles, like 10 days in between and some crazy stuff. So just kind of let that regulate out for a few months. And then we weren't going to try for Lincoln until Charlie was 2. But I told my husband, I said, I can't wait for another baby. I want one now. So we decided to try. And again, on the first try, we got pregnant with him. So that was a huge blessing. I know that's not the case for most people. So we were super thankful for that.
Great, wow. All right, so then how did your pregnancy with him go?
Yeah. So I knew that this pregnancy and birth, I wanted a different experience because my experience with Charlie, although, obviously we got her and it was great because she is the biggest blessing. I wanted something different. And so did my husband. He wanted something different for me too. So first thing, I think I was 6 weeks pregnant, I found a doula. And she actually happens to be my cousin too.
Oh,
So that's a plus. But she was absolutely incredible. And I think everyone should have a doula, but everyone in Mid Missouri should have her because she was absolutely incredible. And I could not have done anything without her. I mean, she was awesome through the whole pregnancy, and birth and postpartum. Yeah, I can give you her information too, but her name was Jessie. And she does, her business is called Simply Sacred Doula Services. And she was the best. Incredible.
that's great. Wow. So
Yeah.
did you find her just because she's family, or did you like go on a search for doulas and like how did that work?
Yeah, so I did actually. She's my cousin. We weren't like super close before this. And I went on a search and all I could find were some doula. There's probably only like 3. We live in a really rural area, so there's probably only 3 that I saw, and they just didn't. I was reading about them, and they were great, but I just didn't think they were the right fit for me. And my mom actually was like, "Hey, you remember Jessie a doula, right?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, no, I didn't remember that." So then I met with her. We probably had our first meeting at 8 weeks. And we went over my birth story with Charlie and kind of what I wanted different. And I immediately hired her because I knew that she was a perfect fit.
Oh, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
how lucky are you that, you
Yeah.
have someone just in your own
Yeah.
family? That's,
She's so great.
that's really. So, how did the rest of your pregnancy go? And were there any differences between Lincoln and Charlie's?
Yeah, for sure. I knew I was pregnant with Lincoln. I think I was like 3 or 4 weeks pregnant because I was so dizzy that I couldn't stand up like every single day and I was sick. And I told my husband, I said, if I am not pregnant, something's wrong with me. So, and that continued for about 25 or 26 weeks.
Oh,
Yeah. We did not find out his gender. So he was a surprise gender baby, which was so cool. But I knew the whole entire time that he was a boy. And my husband thought for sure that we would only have girls. So he was team girl. And I absolutely knew he was a boy. Anytime I would talk to him or whatever, I just knew in my heart that he was a boy. I already knew him.
hmm.
And my husband, he still to this day, he's like, I still can't believe we have a boy. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, we didn't find out his gender. Again, I picked the same OB, went to the same hospital, and then came the glucose test, and I failed by 1 point. And that very same week, that hospital kind of shut. I don't really know why they shut down again, but because it wasn't like height COVID time or anything, but they decided they weren't going to let doulas in the birth room. And so I called Jesse and I was hysterical and I was like, Jesse, I cannot, my Tyler, my husband, he's super great, but he doesn't do well with that kind of stuff. So I'm like, I can't do this without you. And she is really good friends with a midwife at a different hospital. And I kind of looked at that other hospital beforehand because they have some low intervention birthing suites with some tubs. And I was like, oh, we can't birth in the tub, but you can use it as pain management. And I was like, oh man, I really want to try that. But I was like, no, I'm comfortable with this hospital. So that's where I'm going to stay. And then, like I said, the failed glucose test. And I called her and I said, I am not doing that 3 hour again. I will die. And she goes, no, you won't. I said, I'm not doing it. And so she gave me a few options. She said that we could test my sugars every day, do finger pricks, like I think 4 times a day is how much I had to do it. And I said, sweet, I'm game for that. I'm good. So I called my OB's office and they said, absolutely not. And I said, okay, well then I'm not coming back. So at that point, I was like 20, I think I was 28 weeks pregnant. And I switched providers. And that was the best thing that I ever could have done. I went to the midwife that Jesse knew and was really good friends with. Her name was Veronica. And she was absolutely amazing. She knew that, what I had previously with Charlie, she kind of knew. I told her that birth story. And I told her what I wanted different this time. And, she looked at me and she said, I believe you can do this. I believe in you. I believe in your body. And I was like, I cried. I just started crying. I was like, I needed to hear that. I absolutely needed to hear that because I was scared. Um, but yeah, she was like a breath of fresh air. She was so awesome. Oh my gosh. I just get emotional thinking about it because she's fantastic. But let's see. Yep, I switched to her, and then there's 3 other midwives in the or 2 other. There was 2 other midwives in that practice, and then a ton of OBs. So I met with the other 2 also, just so that way, if they were attending the birth, that I was familiar with them too. And yeah, after that, it was pretty uneventful until I was worried about having a car baby because the hospital is an hour away from us. And so my midwife and my doula had me pack a car baby kit. So I was nervous about that, but we did not have a car baby, so it's okay.
What did you have in your car baby kit?
Blankets, towels, a bucket to puke in, which that was just kind of the drive anyways, but water, a clamp for the umbilical cord, and scissors. Just in
Amazing.
case.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. You were very well prepared.
Yeah, just in case.
So I'm guessing you did not have to use it.
No, we didn't. Thank goodness. Whew.
Okay, good. So yeah, well, how did kind of the last weeks of your pregnancy go, and how did delivery day start?
Yeah. So I thought the whole time that I was going to go to 42 weeks and I was going to have to be induced because I was just prepared. I was prepared to go to 42 weeks. I was like, yep, no big deal. It's fine. I'll just stay pregnant forever. And my doula had one more client that was due around the same time as me. And she went into the hospital on April the 6th. My baby was born on April 8th. And she stayed there with that girl until she had her baby on April 7th at like 8 or 9 p.m.
Wow.
So, yeah. I had called her exactly a week actually before Lincoln was born. I was 37 and 3 and I was having prodromal labor like bad. I mean, it was like real contractions. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to have this baby early. And I was still prepared for the 42 weeks, but she was like, no, you're fine. You're going to go past your due date. All will be fine. And she had texted me and told me that other girl was going into labor. If I needed anything, just let her know. And I said, okay, sounds good. Um, and I laugh now because she sent me a little video on April the 7th that because I kept bugging her. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm in labor. Oh my gosh, I think I'm in labor. And so she sent me this little video about this woman who kept thinking she was going into labor and then she went to 42 weeks and had her baby. And I was like, oh, that's totally me. Newsflash, it was not me. On the morning of April 8th at 2 a.m., I woke up and I was like, man, I really have to pee. That's like 5 times a night thing. So I went to the bathroom and I was like, huh, I don't think I'm peeing. And I was like, no, I am. I'm fine. I'm really tired. I need to go back to bed. So, I mean, in my brain, I knew I was like, man, your water just broke. What are you doing? But I didn't. Went back to bed. I got laid down, closed my eyes, and my water broke everywhere. It was like I'm not kidding. It was like the movies. Oh my gosh. It was like probably it seemed like a 5-gallon bucket full of water. And so I'm trying to wake my husband up and I was like, go get me a towel. Go get me a towel. And he says, what for? And I said, before I ruin the bed, my water just broke. And he jumps up and he was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go get gas in the car. So he goes to get me a towel and I get all cleaned up and I go put a diaper on. So I was like, I'm not even gonna mess with that. I'm just gonna put a diaper on and it's gonna be fine. So I called her and she goes, Emily, why are you calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning? I'm really tired. And I said, my water just broke. And she goes, oh, holy cow. Yeah. So she said, okay, are your contractions starting? I said, no, I haven't had anything. She said, okay, here's what you need to do. Get on your birth ball, pump for like, I think 20 minutes and then stop and then try out the mile circuit and get something to eat. I said, okay. So at that point, my husband went to get fuel in the car because we were going to do that on this was Friday morning. We were going to do that on Saturday, because we didn't think we were going to have him until a week or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road. So I was 38 and 3 at this point, the day I had him. But I pumped, I did the mile circuit, and then I pumped again and nothing was happening. I mean, I had a few contractions here and there, but nothing crazy. So I called her back and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to need to rest. I can't do this. I can't do this. I need a nap. And he goes, well, call Jessie back. So I called her and she said, okay, why don't you just go ahead and take a nap? I was like, sweet. Okay, awesome. So I slept. At that point, it was probably like 6. I slept for an hour, woke up at 7, and I was ready to go. I was like, okay, it is baby day. We are doing this. We're going to have a baby by noon. I don't know why I thought that, but I just thought we're going to have a baby by noon. So woke up, still no contractions, pumped again. Our little girl woke up, and my husband took her to my mother and father-in-law's house. And that was like the most sad thing that I've ever done in my life. She was like, "Oh, okay, you're bringing back my baby?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Oh,
So she was so sweet about it. But he took her, and I had some breakfast, and I was still pumping on the birth ball, and nothing was happening. So I called her, and it was about like 8 o'clock then. And she said, "Okay, here's your options. You either wait it out a little bit more, but since your water broke, you're kind of on a clock now since you're going to the hospital. You have 24 hours." And I was like, "Yeah, I know." She said, "Or we can go to the hospital and we can get you on some Pitocin to start your contractions." And I said, "Heck no, I'm not doing that." And she goes, "Emily, I think, we need to think about the options here." And I was like, "Okay, give me 30 more minutes. Let me try to work something up." And she goes, "Okay." 30 more minutes went by and nothing happened still. So I was like, "Okay, well, let me at least like take a shower first." And she goes, "Okay, well, you take a shower." So I took a shower, and then it was, I think, like 10 o'clock, and we started heading that way. And in the car, I had a few stronger contractions, but nothing consistent. And it was actually, when we got to the hospital, it was snowing. So that was not cool. Typically, it doesn't snow in April in Missouri, but yeah, it was cold and it was snowing. So we got there, and Jessie was there when we got there, and so she kind of showed us where to go for triage. And my midwife was actually not on call, but since she's friends with my doula, we were able to have her, which I'm so thankful for now. But yeah, we got into triage. We were in triage for, oh, probably an hour. So at this point, it was like 11:30 before we got moved up to our room. But they had to, test the water to make sure it was my water. And I was like, "I promise you, it is my water. It's a lot. It is my water." But, they had to monitor contractions and the baby and everything. So did that for about an hour. And then we headed up to our room. And luckily, there's only 3 of the low intervention birthing suites. And we got the last one. So thank goodness. I was so grateful for that. But yeah, we got set up. It was like 11:30 or 12 at that point. But we got set up, and my husband went and grabbed me some lunch because I was like, "Well, I might as well eat something. I'm hungry." Because with the midwives and at that hospital, you're allowed to kind of do whatever you want to do. So we got lunch. He set up. I made I called on my birth goals, not and I made it on a poster board, so that way it could be up in the room and everybody could see it. And then I taped pictures of our family and my little girl. But it had like what I wanted for the birth, what I wanted right out immediately after birth, of course, like the delayed cord clamping until it stopped pulsating, and things like that. And yeah, we just kind of sat there for a little bit. My midwife checked me. I was at a 4, and I was like, "Sweet, that's awesome." And I think I was like 80% effaced, but still nothing was really happening. So they brought me the pump because she said we can either do an IV and Pitocin, or we can try pumping one more time. And I did not want an IV at all. So I said, "Nope, we're not doing that. Let's try the pump." So they got the pump out, and immediately I started having contractions 5 minutes apart.
wow.
I think part of it was that I was so scared of having a car baby that, like, once we got in the room, I felt comfortable and relaxed, and I was like, "Okay, let's do this." But yeah, we did that, and we started the pump. We did 20 minutes each hour, and I did that. I did 2 rounds of that. And then my doula said, "Let's go on a little walk." I was still having contractions every 5 minutes. I mean, consistently, and they were getting pretty strong, but pretty manageable still. She said, okay, let's go on a little walk. I said, okay. So immediately when we stepped out in the hallway to take our little walk and do some squats, my contractions stopped. And I was like, oh no, you've got to be kidding me. So I started crying. So I was like, I'm not getting Pitocin. I'm not doing this. I'm going home. And she was like, no, you are not going home. So, yeah, needless to say, we didn't take a very long walk because we wanted my contractions to get back started. So as soon as we stepped foot in the room, my contractions started again, 5 minutes apart. So yeah, and at that point, my midwife was like, okay, well, if you're okay with it, can I check you again and see? And I was like, yeah, sure. So she checked me again and she was like, well, you're still at a 4, but you're like 90% effaced. So I was like, oh, okay, no big deal. She said, but, and I'm not really sure what it was, but there was like a little, not an extra sack of water, but like a little part that didn't bust. And she said, I really think that if you're okay with it and you let me break that, since your water's already broken, that, things will move a lot quicker. And I said, okay, just do it. We're not getting Pitocin, so I'm good with that. My water's already broke anyway, so just do that. And so she did. And immediately when she did that, she said, wow, you just dilated to a 5, maybe a 6. And I was like, whoa, cool. All right. She said, and you're 100% effaced. I was like, okay, this is awesome. And as soon as she did that, my contractions were 2 minutes apart.
Wow.
It was instantaneous, 2 minutes apart, and I was having to breathe through them. It got intense really fast. And at that point, I was still using the birth ball a little bit, and then we lifted the bed, and I was kind of leaning on the bed, swaying back and forth. And my midwife suggested using the rebozo to kind of lift my belly up because my belly was just like straight out. And so when I would have a contraction, it was kind of just squeezing Lincoln in. It wasn't pushing him down. So every time I'd have a contraction, either Jesse or Tyler would lift up on the rebozo so it would make Lincoln go down. And I remember that we started playing my labor playlist at that point too. And I just remember I was standing there at one of those contractions and a tear started rolling down my face. And I was like, yep, this is real. And at that point I was like, okay, all right, this is really getting real. So we had a few more contractions, doing that with the rebozo. And I looked at Jesse and I was like, can I please get in the tub? I said, I know you're going to tell me no, because I'm not far enough along, but please, can I get in the tub? And she said, absolutely. And I was like, what? Sweet. So, which at that point, I kind of started to moan through contractions a little bit. So she knew things were progressing. I didn't. I just thought, I was like 6 and I was just hanging out there. But yeah, so they started the tub. She told me to go have a few contractions on the toilet. And let me tell you, she's like, yeah, that's dilation station. And I was like, okay, those were the worst contractions. That was so bad. Oh my gosh, they were so terrible. That was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I was like, okay, get me off here. I'm done. And she was like, no, stay there until I'm done filling up the tub. And I said, fine. Okay, whatever. It's fine. I'm just here. I don't even think I could get up anyway. So whatever. So I stayed there. I think I did 3 contractions there, which really doesn't seem like a lot because they were 2 minutes apart. And then I went back to leaning on the bed and swaying. And by this time it was, I think, I'm trying to think back, it was probably 4:00 when I got in the tub, and my contractions started like the 5 minutes apart at like 12:30 or 1:00. So we're moving along pretty quick. Yeah, but then I got in the tub and I was like, this is awesome. This is so great. I love this. I'm never getting out. And they were like, okay, that's good. You're feeling good. And at that point they had to put some monitors on my belly just to, monitor Lincoln during contractions since they were getting pretty strong. And they're having so much trouble with it. And it was really annoying, but they're having so much trouble with it. And I was on my hands and knees in the tub because that's what felt best. And Tyler was putting the water on my back, which felt really good. And I was still only having belly labor. I did not have back labor, either of my labors. But they made me sit back in the tub and like lean back so they could fix the monitors. And that was so terrible. I mean, not as terrible as the toilet, but that was so bad. It did that for a couple contractions while they were trying to get the monitor fixed. And the whole time his heart rate was fine. They didn't have any concerns. They're like, well, we'll just take the monitors off and just do the Doppler every now and then when you're having a contraction. I said, okay, that's fine. So I labored in the tub until I want to say it was like probably around 5 o'clock. And then so I'd been in there for like an hour. And at this point, I was like really starting to vocalize. I was extremely loud. My doula said I wasn't that loud, but I know I was. I was super loud. And, but the whole time, kind of what kept me, I don't want to say on pace, but kind of what kept me grounded, I guess, was at the very beginning of my labor, she said, I had this client one time that when she started a contraction, she breathed in and then she made sure that everything was released, starting with her head and going down to her toes. And so I did that every single contraction that I had. And every one, I would feel my fist balling up. And then I would be like, nope. And I would breathe and let everything go. And I was able to manage very well like that. Obviously it's labor and so it's intense, but I really wasn't feeling that much pain because I would just kind of let it wash over me. And by the time that I got down to my toes, it had its peak and it was going down. The contraction was. So that worked extremely well. I would definitely recommend trying that for any moms in labor. But that worked extremely well. And especially the tub helped too. Obviously the water was saving grace, but yeah, we had my labor playlist going, the twinkle lights, and I was just kind of rocking and rolling. And then we got to about probably I want to say it was like 5:05 or 5:10. I have pictures on my phone because we also weren't allowed to have a birth photographer. So my husband was my birth photographer. I was able to have Jesse in this hospital, but we couldn't have a birth photographer. So I was a little disappointed in that, but I was okay. He took pictures on my phone and they have a timestamp. So I was able to and he did such a good job. He took the pictures in live mode. So I can kind of play some of them like a video.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I have like a perfect timestamp of everything and I was able to kind of go through it, but it was like 5:05 and my midwife came back in and well, actually she was in there the whole time I was in the tub. I was like totally out of it in labor land, so I didn't know what was going on, but she was in there the whole time and she was helping me. She was like, Emily, you need to use deep voices. You're getting a little high pitched, use deeper voices when you're moaning and, work through it that way. I said, okay. So at that point, she asked if she could check me and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I think I'm close. And I'm so thankful that she did not say, hey, you're at 8 centimeters. She said, yep, just a little bit of cervix left and then we'll be ready to go. And I'm like, okay, sweet. So in my mind, I was like, I'm like a 9.5. I am doing this. But my doula told me afterwards I was at an 8 and I was like, oh, thank gosh, she did not tell me that because I would have been like, okay, I cannot do this, but she didn't. And she was awesome. But probably a few, like 5 or 10 minutes after that, so it's probably like 5:15 or so, she said, or I started feeling pushy. I didn't know. I was just kind of involuntarily pushing, but with contractions, but I didn't really know what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. And she heard me and she goes, okay, where are we going to have this baby? And I said, right here, I'm not moving. And she goes, we can't have a baby in the tub. And I said, oh yes, we are. I'm not moving. And we had a little bit of argument there, but, needless to say, they just drained the water out and they were just going to let me have him in the tub, but with no water. And at that point, they started checking Lincoln's heart rate with the Doppler. And this is where it kind of gets a little fuzzy for me. So I'm glad my husband took good pictures and my doula took good notes. but let's see, he was born at 5:40, so this was like 5:20. They and I didn't know this is how great my midwife and my doula were, and I had a super great nurse too. She was awesome. She loved natural birth. So she was a good advocate too. But like 5:20, all the water was drained out of the tub, and they were not getting Lincoln's heartbeat. I didn't know this. My husband did, and he was freaking out. I didn't know he was freaking out because my doula was like, "Stop!" But they couldn't get his heartbeat. And they tried a few different things, and they thought it was just the Doppler, so they went and got another one, and they were picking up a little bit, but it wasn't. It was like in the 60s. So at that point, my midwife said, "Get out of the tub now." And I was like, "No, no, I'm not moving. This is great. I don't think I can get up." And, I heard the sense of urgency in her voice, but I didn't know. They didn't tell me, "Hey, we're not getting your baby's heartbeat. You've got to do something." So, my husband and my doula pretty much drug me out of the tub. I started another contraction. I was like, "You're gonna have to wait. I can't move." So had that contraction, and then they pretty much drug me out of the tub because I was like, "No, I'm not walking. You can carry me." So they carried me to the bed, and I was on hands and knees the whole time. That's what felt best for me. So they carried me to the bed. I really did want to try the birthing stool because I had one of those too, and I was like, "Ooh, that's cool. I'm all about that." But I didn't get to try that. But they took me to the bed, and I was on hands and knees, and they still were not picking up a heartbeat. So they flipped me over, and they said, "Okay, we've got to push this baby out." And I was like, "Fine. I don't think I'm ready, but okay." And this again goes to show you how great my midwife was in that situation, because looking back, it actually was super, it was, yeah, it was not good. It was a few minutes away from really not being good. But she was so calm, and she was so encouraging. But I flipped over to my back, and she was helping me stretch, because she knew how quickly he needed to get out. And so I was pushing with all my might. I didn't really want to push like that, but I knew I had to. So I was pushing. That started at, it was a 5:25 is when I started pushing. I had my doula on one side. I had my awesome nurse on the other. And then a nurse was holding my leg, and then my husband was holding my other leg. And I'm so thankful that he got to video a little bit. But I was pushing, and you couldn't even see at 5:25 when I started pushing, you couldn't see his head. You could not see anything. He was nowhere near coming out. And then we had an attending come in, and I didn't know it at the time, but she said, "Okay, do you have an OR booked? We're prepping her for a C." And my midwife said, "No, you will not. You are not doing that. She is not getting a C-section." And I kind of heard like a little bit of that. And I was like, "What?" And then another attending came in with a vacuum, and she said, "You need to use this right now." And I was like, "Huh, okay." I was still like I was like hardcore in labor land. I did not know what was going on. Um, and I kept pushing, and at this point it was like 5:35, and Veronica said, "Okay, Emily, you need to get him out now. If you don't, I'm using the vacuum on the next try." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is actually, this is serious." So I pushed with all my might, and with one push, he went from not being able to see him to fully out. And
Wow.
yeah, at 5:40 he was born. My husband he was videoing up until the point where they brought the vacuum in, and then one of the nurses told him he could not video anymore. So he did take a few pictures of Lincoln coming out, so that was fantastic. But yeah, with one push, his head and whole body was out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was what they call down for 15 minutes. In any other hospital, I would have had a C-section. With any other care provider, I would have had a C-section. But Veronica, she trusted in me. She trusted in my body. Lincoln didn't have any decels prior to that point. So she was confident in him. And it was the most magical feeling I've ever had in my life. But they put him on my chest immediately. But almost immediately, they took him away and took him to the warmer because he was purple. And he was not crying and he was not breathing. So, they did. My midwife is so funny, even like in that dire situation. She goes, "Can I cut his cord?" She was asking me permission to do these things, that made me feel super confident in choosing her and super comfortable with her. But they did. That's the only part of my birth story that I'm like, man, I really wish that he could have stayed on my chest, because as soon as he hit the warmer, he started crying. And I'm like, dang it. But they did have to give him a little oxygen to kind of get him going. But within 10 minutes, he was back on my chest. So that was good. But I did, as soon as they took him, they didn't announce his gender because it was so crazy. But I had him pulled up on my chest, and for that split second, my doula goes, "What is it?" And as they're taking him away, I'm like, "It's a baby boy." And my husband, of course, started bawling his eyes out, and that was so, so sweet. But he went with him and was able to take a picture of him and bring it back to me. And I just kept saying, "I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that." And then I looked at my midwife and I said, "Oh, I still have to have the placenta." And she goes, "Yeah, let's get that done before your baby comes back." And I was like, "Okay." So probably I started having contractions again, and probably within, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes, my placenta came out. And I was bleeding just a little bit. So she kind of monitored that, but I didn't have to have the shot of Pitocin, or anything like that in my leg. And then within 10 minutes, he was back on my chest.
Oh my gosh. What,
Yeah.
like an emotional roller coaster there.
Yeah, it was. As soon as I had him and they took him over to the warmer, of course, that's when I knew that, things were not good. And I looked around and I was like, why is there's probably about 10 doctors in the room. And at that point too, the OB that said that she wanted me to go for a C-section was trying to argue with my midwife about why she didn't take me to a C-section, after I just pushed out my baby, and I was like on a super birth high. So I'm so grateful to have my midwife in that situation, because she really stood up for me and what I wanted, making sure my baby was safe too. But she knew that I could do it, and she had so much confidence in me, and that, like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for her.
Wow. I'm so glad you had that experience. That's
Me
not
too.
an experience a lot of people do have.
Yep. Me too.
So then what were kind of the next few hours like for you, and the rest of your hospital stay?
Yeah. So, I guess I forgot to mention why he was not breathing and his heart rate was down. He did have the cord wrapped around his neck, so that's why. And when I would push, he was kind of strangling himself. So that's why that he had that issue. But yeah, so I did have a second-degree tear again. But if I didn't have to push him out so fast, I wouldn't have. My midwife, she was like, "I am so, so sorry. I am the one who tore you." But I was like, "No, we had to get him here and we had to get him safe. So, it's fine." But so she stitched me up before he was even back to my chest, and she finished after he was done. But since I did have an unmedicated labor, the stitching process, they give you lidocaine, but that literally does nothing. I don't know. I was like, "Wow, you've got to stop. This hurts so bad." And she was like, "You need to hold still." And I was like, "I feel all of that. I literally feel everything right now." So, yeah, that was not pleasant. But when they put Lincoln back on my chest, that was really reassuring, and that helped me kind of get through everything. But yeah, I mean, after he was born, I felt so awesome. He latched right away. He kind of had that same thing that my daughter did with the curling the lip under, but I knew what it was immediately and I fixed it, and he latched, and he was a great nurser, or so we thought. I'll get to that part later. But yeah, immediately he nursed and we did skin to skin for an hour, and then my husband did skin to skin with him. And then they took him and weighed him, and he was 8 pounds, 11 ounces, and he was almost 2 weeks early. So yeah, he was chunky. He was 0.1 ounce from being tested for diabetes. He had the biggest rolls on his arms. Oh my gosh, I've never seen a baby like that, but he was so sweet and so cuddly. But yeah, we were in the postpartum room for probably, I don't know, it's probably 4 hours. They were waiting to get a room downstairs, but I didn't take any Tylenol after I had him. I took nothing. I felt fantastic. I did. The first time I got up to go to the bathroom, they obviously help you. And I did get a little dizzy and almost passed out, but sat down for a little bit and then I was fine. Went to the postpartum room, and as soon as I got into the postpartum room, we cuddled, we did skin to skin the whole time, and we were out of there. It was like, you have to wait 24 hours when you're in the hospital to do all the testing, but because he was jaundiced too a little bit, not bad, but we were out of the hospital within 20, I think it was 26 hours of having him. So that was fantastic because we wanted to get home to our little girl. But yeah, this time our hospital stay was awesome. Our nurses were fantastic. Oh, they were so great. The pediatrician that we saw was not, he was not our normal pediatrician, but a little, just moving a little bit forward, Lincoln ended up having a tongue tie that went undiagnosed by anyone for the first month of his life. And he didn't have a painful latch, none of that, but he was gaining weight, but not as quickly as Charlie had been. So I was like, that's weird. I know I have milk, I've been pumping. But he had a really bad posterior tongue tie, and he had a what they call a high palate. So he wasn't transferring milk very well. And actually, our chiropractors who diagnosed him with that. So I really wish the pediatrician would have. He looked at that and he should have seen it because it was really obvious. He had a very, very bad tongue tie. But yeah, other than that, nursing went really great, or is going really great. I guess I'm still nursing him. He's almost 10 months old. But yeah, other than that little kind of hiccup, but not really hiccup, he just wasn't gaining weight as quickly as Charlie did. Which every baby's different, but yeah, other than that, postpartum was fantastic, immediate, and as soon as we got home, I felt so much better than I did with Charlie, and that just kind of reassured that the natural birth was how I needed. It was my healing birth. It really was. It's how I needed, what I needed to happen. And then postpartum, I didn't have any pain, even though I had a 2nd-degree tear and I had stitches. I didn't have any pain. I didn't, I had nothing. It was, I had no pain, no nothing. I was just great. I felt awesome.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So did you get his tongue tie corrected or just kind of figure it out?
Nope. Our chiropractor said we could either get it corrected, or she did some stretches with him. And so I took him 3 times a week, every week for like a month. And so those stretches were going well, and then we would do them at home too. And so we ended up not having to get his tongue tie corrected because she did say that, it could potentially cause speech problems later. But I didn't want to go through that. I didn't want him to have to go through that. So we opted not to, and hopefully it doesn't cause an issue later. And if it does, we can get it revised then. But yeah, we just went through with the stretches, and now he's, great. The tongue tie is almost completely gone. We've stretched it, and the chiropractor did such a great job in kind of helping us through that and work through that with him.
That's great. Wow. Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So did you have any of like that postpartum anxiety or postpartum rage take hold this time?
Nope. I didn't have any of that. I think part of it was because This time I had a better team. I had a better birth. I 100% think that was the reason. Was I had so much better of a team and such a better birth that, I wasn't disappointed in myself immediately after birth, oh, I got an epidural. Which there's nothing wrong with getting an epidural. That is what I needed with Charlie. That's what I needed, because if I would have had that, I would have been panicked. And I think honestly, my anxiety probably would have been worse. But that's what I needed with her, and that's fine. But, with Lincoln, golly, I mean, the postpartum experience was so much different. I did, encapsulate my placenta, or Jesse did for me. And I did take placenta pills, and I really think that helped a lot too. I did notice, not a change in my mood, but as soon as I ran out of them, I noticed that I had to work a little harder to, stay happy and kind of stay present. But it wasn't anything like the first time. Oh my gosh, it was so much better.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad you had that
Yeah,
redemptive experience for
me
yourself.
too. Me too.
Well, is there anything else about Lincoln's story that you feel like you didn't get to touch on yet?
I don't think so. The only thing that I would suggest to any mamas who are wanting to go natural, is definitely get a doula. And if you are anywhere in the Mid-Missouri area, Jessie is amazing. Simply Sacred Doula Services is her business, and she's awesome. And even if you're not considering a natural birth, a doula can help you so much through pregnancy and postpartum and even the birth, to help you get the things you want. Because, even with Charlie, even though I had an epidural, I still wasn't able to advocate for myself. And that's what your doula is there for, is to advocate for you and to help your partner, help them figure out how to advocate for you as well. I think that's huge, and that's something I didn't have the first time. And she gave me the confidence to do that, and also trust your instincts. Um, with Lincoln, and for him being down so long, obviously I didn't really necessarily know what was going on because I was in labor land. But just trust your mama instincts. What's best for your baby. If you think something's wrong, go get it checked out. And if you think that you're having postpartum anxiety or rage or anything like that, go get it checked out. Please go get it checked out, because it is so frustrating now, knowing that that's what was happening to me and that I didn't go get help, because there's help available. You can get, if you don't want to get medication, there's always counseling. Talk to your friends, talk to your mama friends, because chances are they probably had a similar experience and they just don't talk about it, because it is more common than you think.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing your stories, and to our viewers for listening. If you have a birth story you'd like to share, visit www.birthhigh.com and click Share Your